Hey, good morning. We are on day 7 in our journey through Genesis and one last one through Exodus. And we come today to one of the sons of Jacob. We left off Jacob yesterday, whose name was changed by the Lord to Israel. He becomes the father of the nation of Israel, his 12 sons, members of each of the tribe. But then there's this one son, Joseph. Joseph is the youngest. He's late coming. I can't give you all the details, but let me just beg you to do something. When you go to Genesis chapter 37, read Genesis 37 all the way through 50. You don't have to do it all at once, but just take that journey and meet Joseph. He is the greatest man, in my opinion, he and Daniel, in the Old Testament. He may be one of the greatest men that ever lived, and here's why. This guy is the most Christ-like person we find of anyone in the Bible, and he did this at a time when there was no Bible. He had a scant revelation of God. He knew nothing about Christ, nothing about the sacrificial nature of God, and yet he is just spectacular. There's just nobody like him. Read his story. It is just worth the effort, the time, and it will build you tremendously in your trust in God. Anyway, we meet him in Genesis 37, and I'll just start out reading you in verse 2. It says, "This is the account of Jacob," and then it switches quickly. "Joseph, a young man of 17. And this is important because when you read his story, from 17 to 30, 13 years, he goes through the darkest time that anyone could imagine. Please read it and see for yourself, because it is a spectacular story of God's faithfulness and a human's faithfulness to God in the most difficult circumstances. Anyway, he's 17. It says, "A young man of 17 was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel," that was the other name for Jacob, "now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made him a richly ornamented robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, 'Listen to this dream,'" and I'll just tell you what the dream is. Essentially it's this. He dreams this dream, which turns out to be a vision from God, where all his brothers are submitting to him. All his older brothers submitting to him. You can see why they hated him and didn't like the dream. He then has another dream shortly thereafter, and he was naive enough to share it with them. And this time, his mom and dad were bowing down to him too. Now, these were prophetic God-given dreams that were fulfilled much later on in Joseph's life. That's why I say read Genesis 37 through 50. So what happens next is one day comes where Jacob, whose name is Israel, sends Joseph out to check on his brothers like before. And when they see him coming, they decide they're going to kill him. And then finally Reuben, one of the brothers, says, "No, let's not kill him. Let's throw him into this cistern." And then they end up selling him to some Ishmaelite camel traders, slave traders is what they really were. And this 17-year-old kid is taken away as a slave, and they take him all the way to Egypt. And that's when the story really starts. So here he is. Come picture a terrified 17-year-old kid who was his dad's favorite, who had been babied probably, and he's now surrounded by people he doesn't even speak their language in the harshest of conditions. You just have to read the story. See both? The faithfulness of God when you and I get in our toughest places, and the faithfulness of a human being who did not even have a Bible. So that's kind of putting a lot of the story of Joseph together. He ends up, I'll give you this much, he ends up becoming the number 2 ruler of the most powerful nation in the world of his time. Egypt was the dominant empire of that day, and he ends up becoming, he goes from being a prisoner, from being in the prisons of Egypt, to becoming the number 2 in control of Egypt, just behind the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt himself. It's a tremendous story. And he ultimately becomes the savior of these brothers that hated him and sold him into slavery. So it is well worth reading. It will build your trust in God. And I hope that this story will have a new meaning to you. Thank you.